So let us begin. All right. So let us go ahead and begin with looking at the HL7 messages where we have halted yesterday. So yesterday we were talking about the HL7 messaging, right? So, and we were looking at one HL7 message in detail, and we tried to understand what is the message structure. So let me go ahead and pull that message out. All right. So here we have the HL7 message. So from yesterday's session, we understood that any HL7 message would have segments. Each segment would have fields, and fields would have components. So that's the main structure or hierarchy of the message that we'll have, right? And we understood that every segment has its own name, which is a 3-letter acronym. And this name would help us to understand what kind of data would be sent in that specific segment. And we also understood that every segment that has fields will have field positioning, and this field positioning will determine and tell us which specific data element goes in which field number. So if we go to PID segment specifically, and if we just look at that PID segment separately, we know that with PID segment, we have field number 1, field number 2, this is field number 3, field number 4, field number 5, and so on. So those are field numbers, and which we call as field positioning or field sequencing. And every field number is dedicated to have certain type of data element. Who decides this? HL7 has already decided it, and the specification tells us which data element goes into which specific field. Now, let us try to understand about the component part of it. So till yesterday, we understood segment and its fields. Now let's read or understand how to read the components. At times, what happens is few fields cannot be expressed in one single word or one single term, right? For example, if you look at date of birth, it is one single date. So there is no need for us to go ahead and break that information into multiple components. And here you have gender value, and gender value is just one value. And we can see that it is not needed for us to go ahead and break it down into multiple fields, right? Similarly, we have other fields where we don't need to break it down into multiple fields, but there are few fields where the data elements will be broken down into multiple components. Depending on the kind of data element that we deal with, this particular data element can be broken down. For example, if you look at name, name comes in many different components. Components in the sense many different parts. We have last name, we have first name, we have surname, we have middle initial, we may have prefix like doctor, or we may have suffixes like senior, junior. So name is not one single word or one single uh, component, and it will be broken down into multiple components. So in scenarios where we have a data element which can be broken down into multiple components, HL7 organization has defined that as well, so that you don't get confused, and the opposite person who is receiving the HL7 message also will not be confused on where we have what kind of component. So they have predefined that as well. How they have defined it, how they are expressing it, we will see that down the line. But right now, our scope is to understand how to read that message. Okay. So when we look at certain fields, wherever we see components, those components are separated with the help of a component separator, which is called as caret. So caret separates one component from the other component. Okay. And here, let us ignore these empty carets for now. I'll just delete that so that we don't get confused. So this is the name that we have.
Excuse me.
Hey, yeah,
Question. What are
sure.
the numbers in the segment before the name?
This one,
Yes.
we'll get there. We'll get there. For now, we are just understanding the structure. We will come back to this. We are going to look at all the important fields of PID segment in the upcoming sessions. Okay. But to quickly answer your question, this is patient's MRN number, which is medical record number, which will be sent always in PID 2 or 3. Okay. But we are going to take a look at every field of HL7 message, every segment, and and most important fields within those segments.
Okay.
Okay, so right now we are focusing on name because that's the one which stands as an example for us to understand easily on what component is. So we are looking at components right now. Okay. So um, if you look at this name is broken down into three components, and each component is separated from each other with the help of this caret separator, which is a component separator, which is caret symbol. Now, when I want to express or tell someone that where am I sending last name of the patient, I know that PID 5 is for patient. This is what we have understood yesterday. So PID 5 will have the full name of the patient. But if I want to specifically say where am I sending last name, where am I sending first name, then I would say PID.5.1 is a component. So segment name, field number, and the component number. So 5 PID 5 is this field, 5.1 is this specific component. So this is component number 1, this is component number 2, and this is component number 3. Component number 1 is always dedicated for last name. Component number 2, is always dedicated for first name. Component number 3 is always dedicated for middle initial. Okay, and component number 4, 5, 6, they are dedicated for prefix, suffix, and so on. So we may have many number of components in the name. Right now we are looking at an example where we have 3 components. Okay, so this is how you go ahead and read an HL7 message and understand which specific component is for which specific term or which specific data element. So last name is always sent in 5.1. First name will always sent in 5.2, and middle initial is always sent in 5.3. That is how you read your HL7 message. So wherever you have an HL7 message with a field which is broken down into multiple fields, then you would go ahead and read them as along with the component numbers. Let us look at another example. Patient's address information. Okay, PID 11 is dedicated to send patient's address info. Okay, so here you can see that we have patient's address details. And component number 1 is used for street address, street line. So PID.11.1 is for street line. Okay. And then PID to 11.2 is dedicated for street line number 2. This is line number 1. This is line number, this is line number 2. And component number 3 is for city. And component number 4 is for state, component number 5 is for zip code, and component number 6 is for the country. In this way, an HL7 field can be divided into multiple components, and each component may have dedicated data element. Who defined this? That I can send last name in 5.1, first name in 5.2. Why can't I send 5.1 as first name and 5.2 as last name? You cannot, because HL7 specifications has clearly defined and told you that 5.1 should be last name always, 5.2 should be first name. If you are going ahead and making changes to it, then you are tampering with the basic defined structure of the HL7 message. Okay, so always follow the specification provided to you by HL7 organization. Now, how do I know which specification or where do I look for these specifications? You can go to a website called Caristics. Okay, so in this Caristics website, you have PID segment. So here in the segment section, you can search for the segment that you want to look for. So I am searching for PID. If I go to PID segment, here I have the specifications for PID. And if I see patient ID, patient name, if I click on that, it is telling me that PID 5.1 is for last name, 5.2 is for first name, 5.3 is for middle initial, and so on. We'll come back to this when we talk more about data types and all. We will understand a little bit more detail on how to navigate through this particular website. But if you want to look at the specification, this is the place where you can go and search for fields and understand which specific field has which kind of data. So here, as I said, we have patient name in PID 5, patient's address in PID 11. So if you click on PID 11, it will show you the component level mapping as well. So here you can see what all data elements are present in components. Okay. So while building your HL7 message, you should follow the specification and then build your HL7 message. Okay. Any questions regarding the components?
Can you share that link with us, please?
Sorry,
Can you
Vitalis?
share the link with us?
Yeah. I mean, I can share it with you, or you can just type characteristics in Google and it will take you there. But anyways, I have pasted that in the chat. You can grab it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now that we have understood about components, one important thing to notice here is few of the fields are left blank. For example, if you see this field is left blank, this field is left blank, and here this field is left blank. What does that mean? It means that the data that has to be sent in this specific field is not present in the front end, or it is not present anywhere. Okay. If the data element is not present, you are supposed to send it as blank. For example, in PID 4, let's say in PID 7, we have date of birth of the patient. This patient data is not available where patient's date of birth is captured. Okay. For some reason, they did not capture the date of birth of the patient while registering a patient. In that case, we are supposed to go ahead and send it as blank because we don't have that data. Just because it is blank, we cannot go ahead and remove that completely. That's not how it works. If you don't have the data, just send it as blank. If you have the data, then just send the data. Okay. So that's about blanks. Same logic applies for components as well. If a specific component, let's say, for example, I don't have first name of the patient, then I will leave that particular component 5.2 as blank because I do not have the data, or I did not capture the data for some reason. Okay. So any questions specifically for reading the HL7 message? Okay, great. So let's proceed with the next one. Now, in today's session, not today's session, but in further extending to what we have seen yesterday, we will take a little bit deeper look at event-driven messaging methodology. So what is event-driven messaging methodology? I told you yesterday the basic principle on which the HL7 messaging is built. So from yesterday's session, we understood that any event that is happening in the front end or in the real-time scenario, patient getting registered is an event. Patient having an appointment scheduled is an event, right? So whenever these events are happening and we feel that there is a need for the data that was captured during that event to be sent across from one system to another system, then such kind of event is called as a trigger event, because that event is demanding trigger of data from one system to another system. And HL7 messaging is based on this basic principle. If the data has to flow, then that is a trigger event. Okay. And each of these events have different names. For example, patient registration is an event. Patient's demographic data getting updated is an event. Patient having an appointment scheduled is an event. Getting it cancelled is an event. In this way, the entire workflow of the patient who is going right from the beginning, getting himself registered till the point he leaves the hospital, there are several events that will happen. Okay. And these events may be trigger events or may not be trigger events, depending on the fact that the data is triggered from one system to another. Okay. For example, patient getting admitted is an event. Patient getting an observation done, which is nothing but sending out lab results, is an event. So there are series of events that will happen, and these events can become a trigger event if the data has to be sent across. Now, few events are not trigger events because the data is not sent anywhere. For example, patient gets registered, it's a trigger event. Patient gets an appointment scheduled, that is also a trigger event. Now, patient visits the doctor, even before visiting the doctor, the head nurse would go ahead and take the vitals of the patient, like blood pressure, height, weight of the patient, and so on, right? This data is saved in the EHR system, and it is not required for us to send the data for that event to anywhere, any other system. So that event is not a trigger event because it is not triggering the data to some other system altogether. So, and a trigger event is an event where the data is being sent from one system to another system. As simple as that. Next, let us look at the areas or categories where we'll see these trigger events. So when we look at hospitals as a bigger picture, within hospital, you have categories called registration. You will have appointment related events happening. You will have lab related events happening. You will have pharmacy related events happening. You will have invoice related events happening. Okay, but these are the terms in our language, which means generic human readable language, right? But in terms of HL7, each of these categories have a dedicated code so that HL7 messaging has its own unique naming convention. Okay, let us look at how we name them, or how we not name them, but how we call them in terms of HL7 message. Okay, so if you look at the registration related events, all the registration related events, we call them as ADT. ADT stands for admit, discharge, and transfer. So any event that is happening related to admission of a patient, discharge of a patient, or transfer of a patient, we will go ahead and represent that in the form of an ADT. Okay, the message code for that is ADT. Next, what we have is appointment scheduling. Appointment scheduling is for the events which are related to scheduling an appointment. This we call it as SIU. SIU stands for scheduling information unsolicited. And then you have lab orders. These are represented with the help of ORM and ORU. ORM stands for observation request message. ORU stands for observation result unsolicited. Okay, don't worry about the acronyms. We are going to see every message code in detail down the line. I have PDF documents and notes which will tell about what is this, what is the full form of each of these. So just try to understand the concept and the naming conventions that we have and relate to the name. So observation request message, which is nothing but to request an observation from a lab. Observation result unsolicited is observation result that is coming back from lab to the EHR system. Then you have invoices generation, which is represented with the help of DFT, which is detailed financial transaction. Okay. Now, let us go ahead and look at the individual events that may happen. Each of these categories may have many events happening within them, but we are looking at only the most frequent and most frequent ones that we come across, so that you can understand how these events are called in terms of HL7. So if you look at patient registration, the most common events are new patient registration and update of existing patient information. Right? New patient registration is patient getting registered for the first time. Update is changing phone number or email address or address, something like that. Next, we have three categories in appointment scheduling. So we have new appointment scheduling, update of existing appointment, and then we have cancellation of the appointment. Then next we have lab orders. Lab orders are for sending out orders and results. And then we have invoice generation, which is billing details, which is going to generate the billing data from the EHR system to the billing systems. Okay. Now, these are the generic terms again. In terms of HL7 messaging, we may call them with a different name called as trigger events. Whatever we have seen in the previous slide are called as message codes, and these events are called as trigger events. So every message code might have multiple trigger events within it. Okay, let's see what these are called in terms of HL7 trigger events. So a new patient registration, ADT, is represented with the help of a code called A28. Okay, and then you have update of existing patient information, which will be represented with the help of A31. Okay, these are trigger event codes. Earlier, we have seen message codes. One message code might have many different trigger events. If you go to appointments, new appointments are called as S12. Update of existing appointment is called as S14. Then you have cancellation of an appointment, which is triggered or which is represented with the help of S15. Then you have lab orders. So for orders, we have the event type called as O01. For results, we have the event type called as R01. Okay. Next, what we have is invoice generation. For invoice, you will have a event type called as PO3. Okay. So these are the trigger events that we are going to take a look at. So in our what we are going to do next is to look at each message in detail. For example, ADT A28 and ADT A31. So we are going to take a look at the demographic message structure in detail and look at the segments in detail and also the fields pertaining to each of these segments and understand what kind of data fields are sent in each of these segments. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So any questions with regards to message codes, trigger events, or anything? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So let us go ahead and continue with the message structure. So now that we have seen that we have ADT messages, SIU messages, we have DFT, we have ORM, ORU, we are going to take a look at each of these message structures. Okay. And then we will take a look at what are the segments that are present in each of these message types. And we will also take a look at the structure of individual segments in detail. Okay, so let's begin with ADT A04, ADT A28, or ADT A08 or ADT A31. So this segment or this particular message type, which is ADT A04 or ADT A08, is basically used to go ahead and represent the name of the message. Now let's go back to HL7 message again. So let me bring that HL7 message up. Now here in this HL7 message, how do you tell whether this message is a demographic message or patient registration message, or how do you tell that message is uh, an appointment schedule or appointment cancellation? There will be one field within the HL7 message, the highlighted one, which is a message 9, which will talk about what kind of message is this. Okay, now that we know what message code is, what is the trigger event, by looking at this message, I can tell whether this HL7 message is of patient registration, or is it for patient demographic update, or is it for patient's appointment schedule or charges. So this value with a combination of message code plus trigger event is called as message type. Okay, message type. Vijaykanth, can you be on mute if you don't mind? All right, so message type is nothing but a combination of message code and trigger event. Message code is a thing that will tell you about the category of the event that is happening, whether it's a registration event or whether it is scheduling event or whether it is charge related event. And in trigger event, it will specifically point you out to a one specific trigger event. So any message code might have multiple trigger events. So ADT A04 is for new patient registration, or ADT A28 is also for new patient registration, right? For example, let's say ADT A28 is for new patient registration. ADT, same message code. but a different event. A31, update of existing patient information, right? And then you have ADT A40, representing patient data merge. Okay. So you will have different event types like this as part of one message code. And this entirely is called as message type. For example, if you look at book or a textbook from school, you will have name for the textbook at the top of the page so that you would know which kind of textbook it is. In the same way, this is the name of the message which will tell you what kind of HL7 message is this. So what we are going to do now is to look at the message structure for each message type. It is impossible to cover all the message types and all the event types that we have. So I have included covering all the ones that are most frequently used. So whatever we have seen here, these are the ones that are frequently used. So we will take a look at the structure of registration. We will take a look at the structure of appointments. We'll take a look at the structure for lab orders. We'll also take a look at the structure for invoices. Okay. So let's begin with the registration related message structures, which will be for ADT A04, A28, A31, A08, and so on. Okay. Now, if you look at this message structure, here I have defined or I have represented it with few of the segments: MSH, EVN, PID, PV1, GT1, and IN1. Right? These segments are part of an ADT message. Now, is this the defined structure? No, it is not. It can have all of these segments. It can have more number of segments apart from this. An ADT message cannot have a GT1 or IN1 as well. Okay. So the structure that I am providing you here is a common structure that we see across the multiple message or multiple trigger events. Okay. So the structure is not predefined. If you need to look at a structure of any message type, we have to look at the implementation guides. So the topic of implementation guides for us comes at last. We will take a look at, once we understand the entire development workflow, then we will go through implementation guide to understand how to use an implementation guide and build your HL7 message. For now, when we are looking at the message structure, we are looking at the generic structure of the message and understanding what are the segments which will be part of this particular message. Okay. So when you look at an ADT message, these are the common segments that you will see most frequently. 90% of the cases, these are the common segments that you will come across. Okay. We'll have segments of MSH, which is message segment header. We'll have segment called EVN, which is to inform or which is to talk about the event associated with this particular MSH segment. Then we have PID segment, which is patient identification segment. Then you will have PV1, where you send the visit related data. Then you have GT1, which is guarantor information. Patient might be associated with a guarantor or patient himself might be a guarantor. So that information is also captured. Then you have IN1, which is insurance segment, which we'll talk about sending out insurance information in the HL7 message. Okay. Now, when does this message get triggered? Or when is this HL7 message gets generated? Let's figure out. So give me 1 second. Let me see if I can bring up one OpenEMR demo login. All right. So now here you can see that we have a PM application. So this is the patient registration module. Okay. So whenever a patient is getting registered in the front end, let's say I will say patient Mr. and then I will say name, Dickson, George, and then preferred name, we'll leave it blank. External ID, we'll just specify it as some ID, and then for date of birth, we'll choose some random date of birth, and then we can go ahead and give marital status or assign single. So let's leave it blank. Billing note, test note. I think that's it. So here we have, let's leave those fields as blanks. And then we can enter contact information. We can enter insurance related data, guarantor related information. So you can basically enter whatever information you need. But once you provide all of that information, you are clicking on create patient. Looks like this is mandatory. So let me give it as test. Test. All right. So let's go ahead and create. All right. Now it is creating the patient for me. Confirm, create a new patient. All right. So new patient is created, which is with the name Dickson George. All right. So now the name is clear, the date of birth is assigned, and everything is present. So you can view the entire patient history, right? Now, the moment the patient is created, you saw that I clicked on create patient, right? So that would be the trigger for the HL7 message to be generated. So as soon as the patient gets registered, that is when this HL7 message gets generated with the message type ADT A04 or A28, depending on the specification of certain organization. Okay. So now when you go ahead and provide this data or this data in the EHR application. So here we have registered, and after that HL7 message gets generated. What would be the content of that HL7 message? That's what we will be sending it in the individual segments. Okay. Now let us go ahead and start taking a look at the each and every individual segment and try to understand the data that is sent in individual segments. Okay. So during the patient registration, what all did we capture? We have captured patient name, date of birth, gender, maybe address. We also may be capturing patient's insurance information and guarantor information as well, as I have shown you. Okay. So the HL7 messages that generated will have this segment structure. Let's look at understanding segment structure of each of these segments. Let's begin with MSH segment. So MSH segment has details regarding the header data, meaning who is sending the message, who is going to receive the message, when exactly the message got generated, what kind of message is this. All of this information will be present in the MSH segment. That is the reason it is called as segment header, because it is going to communicate information about metadata, which is nothing but header data on who are the parties who are exchanging the information. Okay. Every segment that we are going to take a look at will have this predefined structure. Okay. And we will be seeing this table. This table is basically going to tell you what is the data element for every field. And it will also tell few rules that you have to follow with each of these fields. Okay. For example, we have MSH1, MSH2, MSH3, 4. So for every field, you will have these columns, which must be respected. Now, if you see MSH1, it has a column called length. And if it has a number, then we should follow that specific length only. We cannot exceed the characters greater than the length that is provided in the field. Okay, and then every field has its own data type. We are going to take a look at data type in detail at a later point once we complete the HL7 message structure. But for now, just keep in mind that every field will be associated with a data type. Next, what we have is optionality. Every field will have an optionality which will talk about whether a field is required or whether a field is optional. Then you have something called as repeatability, which will say whether this field can repeat or not. So to understand repeatability, we need to take a look at an example, a real-time data element, and then understand it. So we will come back to this one. And then every field might be having a table associated with it, which will talk about list of values that will be sent in this table. So we will take a look at an example for this one as well down the line. And last, we have the name of the field, which will tell what kind of field this is, or what kind of data element can be sent in this specific field. Okay, this way we have structure for every segment. So this is for MSH, we have one for EVN, we have one for PID. So we are going to take a look at every segment. Being an HL7 engineer, you need to know at least few of the segments by heart. Okay, I'll tell you what those segments are down the line, but whatever segments you are seeing here are part of an HL7 ADT message, and few of the fields are only highlighted in green, which means we are going to take a look at only the fields that are highlighted. Reason is other fields are not very important or not really used in the real-time use cases. So from my experience, whatever I have seen to be used over a period of time, I have highlighted them so that we can concentrate only on the fields that are required. Okay, so that's what we will do in our next upcoming sessions. In tomorrow's session, we will take a look at what are the various kinds of optionalities that we have. What is the prominence of length? Why do we have 0? What is this table? What are the data elements that will come out from table? We'll look at individual structures. And for every individual field, if there is a workflow explanation that is required, we are going to take a look at examples, why certain field is used. If that is not self-explanatory. If that is self-explanatory, we'll just go through that field and then pass on to the next field. So that way we are going to take a look at the individual data structure for every segment. Okay, now I'll open up for questions. Any questions from anyone? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So I hope you guys have your concept clear for.
All right.
Hey, Daniel. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Did you send out the recording from yesterday?
Srinivas will share it with people who are have enrolled, and he will also share if you want it today as well. If you couldn't attend, I will have him send it today. Just message Srinivas. He will send the recording to you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Srinivas has posted his phone number, and you can WhatsApp him and you can talk to him if you would like to enroll. From tomorrow's session, I think whoever has enrolled will be can continue joining the sessions. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye
You all
bye.
have a good day. Bye bye.
You too.